case of Ashley Wadsworth. Ashley Wadsworth was born on July 25, 2002, in Vernon Township, British Columbia, Canada. She was the daughter of Kenneth Wadsworth and Christy and had an older sister named Haley. The Wadsworth family was large and close-knit, consisting of over 50 people, including cousins, uncles, and aunts of varying degrees of kinship, all living in the same community. Ashley was a cheerful, outgoing, and energetic girl who was popular and had many friends. She enjoyed outdoor activities such as swimming, horseback riding, and skiing. She was also passionate about tennis and played the clarinet. Ashley was very active on social media, frequently sharing memes, jokes, and photos. It was through social media that Ashley met Jack Seppel in 2015, when she was 12 years old and he was 15. Jack Seppel was born on January 9, 1999. His mother, Tracy Dalton, was married to a man named Ricky. Jack's relationship with his father, who passed away in 2019, was reportedly strained. Jack did not communicate with his brother, Jordan, but he did stay in touch with his sister, Nadia. Apart from his mother and sister, Jack did not have many close relationships, preferring to interact with people primarily through the internet and video games. According to Jack's acquaintances, he had a mixed reputation in school. On the one hand, he was remembered as a charming, fun, and lively kid. On the other hand, they recalled his dark side, which emerged when he became angry and displayed aggressive behavior towards himself and others. A mutual friend introduced Jack to Ashley through social media, a common way for teenagers to meet and form virtual friendships. As their online relationship grew, Ashley and Jack became close virtual friends. At the time, Ashley didn't have a smartphone and used her family's computer to access social media, so her family was aware of her friendship with Jack. During their long-distance friendship, Jack had relationships with other girls, and Ashley also had typical teenage experiences. Although they occasionally stopped communicating, their connection never completely faded, and they continued to stay in touch over the years. As they grew older, Ashley and Jack's relationship evolved. They started communicating through video calls, which led to a more intimate and romantic relationship. Jack became a familiar figure to Ashley's family, who would often greet him warmly when they saw him talking to the guys. He also sent Ashley gifts, such as teddy bears and purses, on multiple occasions. Ashley's family and friends noticed that she had a tendency to compare every boy she met to Jack. However, due to the significant time difference between their locations, Jack lived in Essex, while Ashley was in Vernon. They struggled to find time to talk, often waking up too early and going to bed too late. As Ashley turned 15 in 2018, she began to express a desire to meet Jack in person. However, her family refused to let her travel alone to another continent. Like many young couples, they occasionally argued, and when Ashley would block Jack on social media during these fights, he would find ways to contact her again, creating new accounts or sending messages through his sister or acquaintances. This behavior was seen as disturbing and intrusive by Ashley's loved ones, but she continued to insist that Jack was a kind and compassionate person. In October 2018, Jack, who was 19 at the time, got a tattoo of Ashley's name on his arm when she was just 16. Her parents thought this display of affection was excessive and warned her to be cautious. However, Jack soon began exhibiting jealous and violent behavior. He would become angry if he suspected Ashley was talking to other guys, despite continuing to date other girls himself. He claimed Ashley was his favorite and swore his loyalty to her alone. This incident marked the beginning of a disturbing pattern of behavior. Ashley's friends and family grew increasingly concerned as Jack's behavior escalated. One day, Ashley called a friend who was at Jack's house and he wouldn't let her leave. According to the friend who overheard the conversation, Ashley surprisingly remained calm, as if she was used to such situations. She simply asked Jack to stop being crazy. Ashley confided in her friends about the incident but didn't tell her parents. However, her friend strongly advised her to cut off all contact with Jack. Despite his history of fights and problematic behavior, Ashley and Jack continued to reconcile. At just 18 years old, Ashley had known Jack since her early teens, but she seemed unaware of the extent to which he had manipulated her from a young age. Ashley started working at fast food restaurants and department stores to save money for leisure activities. Her first purchase was a tablet, which allowed her to use social media more privately. She then began saving for a trip. During her senior year of high school, Ashley, a spiritual and inquisitive person, had a profound moment of insight after reading the Book of Mormon. This led her to start following the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Ashley graduated from Seitan High School in 2020. She wanted to experience university life fully, so she decided to take a year-long break before continuing her studies. In the first half of 2021, continued working and saving money. In April of that year, she was baptized into Mormonism. With her newfound independence and financial stability, Ashley decided to travel to the UK to meet Jack in person and celebrate his birthday with him. Despite her parents' and friends' concerns, Ashley was determined to make the trip as she was of legal age and had her own savings. Ashley left Canada for the UK on November 12, 2021, on a 6-month tourist visa. This was her first time leaving her homeland, and she was thrilled. The next day, November 13, 2021, Ashley met Jack in person for the first time. On the same day, Ashley updated her profile picture to a photo of them together. At 22 years old, Jack looked significantly older than Ashley, who was 19. His numerous tattoos, including those on his face, created a striking contrast with Ashley's youthful appearance. During her stay in London, Ashley lived with Jack in his house, located in a public housing estate in northwest Chelmsford. The neighborhood had a questionable reputation, but they spent time exploring the nicer areas of the city in Essex. Jack seemed like the same charming, caring person Ashley had met online, often showering her with compliments and taking romantic selfies. However, Jack's behavior was inconsistent, and he could be cruel at times. Despite being together daily, Ashley's tourist visa prevented her from working, and Jack was unemployed, relying on benefits. Occasionally, his mother Tracy, who lived nearby, provided support. Throughout her trip, Ashley regularly posted photos and updates on social media, showcasing their happy moments and romantic experiences. The pictures often featured they embracing, highlighting their seemingly joyful relationship. Ashley kept in regular touch with her family through video calls, and everything seemed fine at first. They even adopted a new kitten, Winston, which was a positive addition to their lives. Nevertheless, over time, Jack started to become more withdrawn and isolated. Ashley's trip to England was supposed to be an exciting adventure, but it quickly turned into a restrictive and isolating experience. Her boyfriend, Jack, had lost interest in exploring the country and instead preferred to stay indoors, smoke, and play video games. As a result, Ashley's options for activities were severely limited, and she was forced to do only what Jack wanted. Before arriving in England, one of Ashley's friends from church had arranged for her to meet some American missionaries who would be in Chelmsford at the same time. Ashley was eager to connect with them, but Jack refused to let her attend church on Sundays. Despite this, she continued to secretly communicate with the missionaries through text messages, deleting the conversations to avoid Jack's suspicion. Ashley's new friends soon realized that Jack was controlling and possibly abusive. When she confided in them about her problems, Ashley admitted that she knew she deserved better, but she was trying to keep Jack happy. However, the abuse went beyond controlling her communication. About 6 weeks into their trip, Jack became violent when he discovered that Ashley had blocked 2 UK phone numbers. He mistakenly believed that the numbers belonged to other men, triggering the jealous outburst. In a disturbing text message to his mother, Jack revealed that he had physically abused Ashley. Ashley created a secret profile where she documented the bruises she had sustained. She confided in her sister Haley about the abuse, but warned her not to tell their mother, fearing that their family would turn against Jack. After Jack overdosed on anti-anxiety medication in late December 2021, Ashley was tasked with overseeing his medication as his caregiver. She kept this responsibility a secret from her mother and friends, but Haley inadvertently revealed the truth. Ashley's mother expressed concern and asked her to return home, but Ashley insisted on staying with Jack until he recovered. In early January 2022, another disturbing incident occurred. Jack smashed a beer glass over Ashley's head, leaving her in tears. While Jack forced her to clean up the broken glass, Ashley contacted her sister via video call, revealing the true extent of her situation. Jack was frantic, pacing back and forth, yelling and grinding his teeth. His distress prompted Ashley to contact her sister, Haley, who urged her to return home. However, Haley's fell on deaf ears. A brief period of calm followed, marked by Jack's 23rd birthday celebration with his family, where everyone put on a united front and pretended everything was fine. In an attempt to defuse the tension, Jack's mother and stepfather organized a family vacation to a seaside town shortly after. The photos from the trip appeared perfect, showcasing a happy and tranquil Ashley, which brought relief to her parents, who remained unaware of the seriousness of the situation. In late January, an intense argument broke out and Jack's behavior turned violent once again. He hit Ashley and threw a candle and a TV remote at her while she was video chatting with Haley, who was pleading with her to return home. Although Ashley had initially agreed, she ultimately decided to stay. Despite witnessing Jack's cruel nature, she clung to the hope that the charming person she once knew was still buried deep within him. Ashley was convinced that time, her love, or perhaps medical treatment could help Jack overcome his destructive tendencies, a sentiment that was echoed by her mother during subsequent conversations with Jack. Jack accused Ashley of cheating on him, physically abused her, and later apologized. Despite feeling guilty about his actions, Jack's behavior continued. The situation escalated on the morning of February 1st, 2022, when Jack became angry with Ashley again. He accused her of abandoning him and seeing other people in secret. He demanded to see her phone and check her social media accounts to prove his allegations. Around 8 a.m., their neighbor Haley Borton Shaw heard Ashley's screams through the shared wall. Ashley soon showed up at Jack's doorstep, drawing attention to the distressing situation unfolding between them. Haley was shocked and Ashley appeared at her door, barefoot and crying, with a cut on her palm that was bleeding. Ashley explained that Jack had become enraged when he caught her looking at intimate photos of them. He had verbally abused her, physically attacked her, smashed her phone, and thrown her kitten against the wall. Despite Haley's concerns for Ashley's safety and fear that Jack might try to harm her, Ashley asked Haley not to call the police. Haley reluctantly agreed, but begged Ashley to see a doctor instead of returning to Jack's apartment. When Ashley refused, Haley decided to go and talk to Jack herself. During their conversation, Jack apologized for his actions and remained calm. Haley then left for a doctor's appointment around 9 a.m. Meanwhile, Jack's neighbor received a misdelivered package and brought it to his doorstep. Jack was hesitant to answer the door, which wasn't unusual since he was known to be an unfriendly and paranoid person. Around this time, Ashley called her family using Jack's cell phone, informing them of her situation. Ashley's mother was already aware of what was going on because Haley had previously confided in her about Jack's abusive behavior towards Ashley. Ashley's parents immediately bought her a return ticket for February 3rd to escape the abusive relationship. When she informed Jack, he offered to drive her to the airport. However, before she left, Ashley's mother made it clear that if Jack hurt her again, she would contact the police. She also advised Ashley to go straight to the airport if Jack assaulted her again. The conversation between Ashley and her family lasted for 3 hours before they ended the call. It was 11 a.m. in Chelmsford and 3 a.m. in Vernon when the call ended. A short time later, Jack sent a message to his mother, admitting to brutally beating Ashley again. During the assault, Ashley fell to the floor and possibly broke her arm. This violent incident occurred between 11:22 a.m. and 12:38 a.m. Ashley managed to send several messages to her family and friends using Jack's phone, but since it was nighttime, no one responded immediately. She also reached out to her friends at the church in Chelmsford, asking for help in describing the emergency. Unfortunately, these messages were not received until hours later, when it was too late to intervene. Between 12:38 and 12:45, Jack violently attacked Ashley, choking her until she lost consciousness. He then proceeded to the kitchen, retrieved an 11-centimeter knife, and repeatedly stabbed Ashley's chest and stomach around 100 times, ultimately ending her life. Following the attack, Jack updated his social media profile picture with a photo of himself and Ashley, accompanied by the caption, "Always mine." He also recorded a video message for Haley, expressing his love for Ashley, apologizing and stating that he couldn't let her go, adding that his mental state was unstable. The video, which was never sent, showed Ashley's body next to him. Meanwhile, in Vernon, Ashley's family discovered a large number of messages from her on their phones. They immediately contacted Jamie Ashworth, a family friend from their Mormon community in Chelmsford. Jamie and Tyler Borden, another acquaintance from the church, went to Jack's apartment in England. After knocking on the door and receiving no response, they called the police and left the scene. In a desperate attempt to cover his tracks, Jack texted Ashley's family and friends, pretending to be her. However, the messages from loved ones continued to pour in and Jack ignored them. Meanwhile, they were frantically trying to reach Ashley. Eventually, Jack called his sister Nadia and confessed to killing Ashley, even going so far as to show her the body. This disturbing conversation took place at approximately 4:13 p.m. When the police arrived at the apartment 10 minutes after Jamie's call, they found that the situation had already turned tragic. They arrested Jack, who was covered in blood, on the spot. He told the officers that he had experienced a psychotic episode and confessed to the crime. As a result, he was taken into custody and sent to Chelmsford Prison. His trial was scheduled for September 7, 2022 at Chelmsford Crown Court. The court's psychiatric examination concluded that Jack was mentally fit to stand trial. However, the evidence against him was irrefutable, including a video recording of him admitting to the crime. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, immediately pleaded guilty. The judge then informed him that, given his confession, a life imprisonment sentence was inevitable. At the hearing, which took place under Judge Edward Murray at Chelmsford Crown Court, Prosecutor Simon Spence detailed Jack's extensive criminal history, which dated back to his teenage years. During the hearing, Ashley's parents learned the disturbing truth about Jack. Jack had a history of run-ins with the law, including arrests for stalking, kidnapping, and violent assault. He had also been issued multiple restraining orders, including against his mother and former girlfriend. The revelation of Jack's extensive criminal record shocked and devastated Ashley's parents, who had never suspected the true nature of the man who had taken their daughter's life. During the hearing, the prosecution and defense discussed a letter written by Jack from prison in which he apologized for his actions. The letter was later released to the media by Judge Murray, who cited the importance of transparency in the justice system. In the letter, Jack expressed regret to Ashley's family, especially her mother and sister Haley, acknowledging that nothing could undo the harm he had caused. Jack accepted responsibility for his actions and acknowledged that his mental state contributed to the tragedy. He also claimed to have previously discussed his mental health with Ashley. Ultimately, Jack was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 23 years. In 1987, 85-year-old Edna Loftman lived in Oxford Township, Pennsylvania in the 1500 block of Carlisle Pike on Route 94. On August 12, 1987, she attended church and was then dropped off at her home where she lived alone. Sadly, the next day, she was found dead by friends and neighbors in her home, partially nude with her mouth full of pills. There were also pills around her body and she was holding an orange pill bottle and the contents of her purse were strewn about. She had also been sexually assaulted. In court documents, state police said the home appeared to have been ransacked and multiple cigarette butts were found, even though she was not a smoker. Police initially arrested Edna's distant relative, Barry Loftman, for the crime. He was 24 years old at the time and suffered from a mental disability and had the mental capacity of a 10-year-old. He gave a false confession to police and was sentenced to life in prison for her rape and murder, despite his blood type not matching the semen found on her body. In the 80s, there was no DNA testing and sometimes a confession was the only thing needed to convict someone. In 2003, Patriot News journalist Pete Shellum revealed multiple inconsistencies in the murder conviction. He reported that Barry was innocent of the crime and helped authorities track down the missing evidence. Pete had connected the case to 3 troopers that were accused of misconduct that resulted in false evidence and confessions in the past. One of the problems in the case stemmed from the confession obtained by one of the troopers, who at the time claimed Barry knew details of the crime that only the killer would know. He was then released in 2003 after serving 16 years in prison when DNA showed he was not the killer. While DNA was still new technology, another major discrepancy in the case was the disappearance of the DNA taken from Edna's body. Turns out, the judge on the case gave remaining samples to Barry's court-appointed attorneys and left the case open, and Pete found that one of these attorneys sent samples to a Penn State professor in 1994, but failed to follow up when asked for a comparative sample. In 2003, Pete tracked down the DNA to Professor Mark Stonking, who was teaching in Germany. The professor had preserved the samples in his refrigerator, and it was the testing of those samples that proved Barry was innocent. Fast forward 15 years, and in 2018, DNA from the crime scene was sent to Parabon Nanolabs for genetic analysis. Then genetic genealogy was used to identify the real killer, Christopher Spielman. Spielman had lived next door to Edna in a duplex-style home for 10 years before she was killed. Edna lived on the right side and Spielman on the left side with separate doors and only a wall that separated them. A Pennsylvania State Police trooper talked to Spielman about the killing and asked for a DNA sample. He denied ever knowing Edna despite sharing a duplex with her for 10 years. He also denied knowing that Barry Loftman was arrested for the murder. However, he was a chronic smoker, which would explain the cigarette butts. The trooper said while talking to Spielman, he became visibly shaken and said several times that he was worked up. When police finally collected a DNA sample, they discovered it was a match. Coincidentally, the results from Parabon linked the DNA with two likely surnames, Loftman and Spielman. Spielman not only had personal ties to Edna, but also genetic ties, and his mother's maiden name was Loftman. Therefore, he was related to Edna as well as Barry as distant cousins. However, it is unknown if they knew they were related at the time of the murder. Spielman was then charged with criminal homicide, rape, robbery, and burglary. Spielman admitted that he went into her home to rob it, but she ended up being home. That's when he attacked, killed her, and then sexually assaulted her. He was arrested in July of 2021, 34 years after the murder. Reporter Pete Shalom, whose relentless digging into old court records, crime lab reports, and coerced confessions during his 23 years as a reporter led to the release of 5 wrongly convicted prisoners over the years. Sadly, he died of suicide in 2009 at the age of 49. Barry Sheikh, co-director of the Innocence Project at Yeshiva University in New York, called him a rare one-man journalism innocence project. Michelle Louise Wyatt was born in the Naval Hospital in Balboa Park on February 9, 1960 to Raymond and Louise Wyatt. She was described as bubbly, outgoing, fun-loving, and enjoyed dancing, scuba diving, running, and anything outdoors. She grew up in San Carlos, California, and graduated from Patrick Henry High School in 1978. At the age of 20, she was a college student and also a cashier at the Safeway in Mission Hills, living at Kerrigan Court. On the night of October 8, 1980, Michelle's boyfriend Patrick was visiting and the couple played 3 games of pool in the garage. On their way out of the garage, she kidded him about her victories as she had won all 3 games. After turning out the garage lights, they went back inside the condo through the sliding glass doors in the dining room and sat down in the living room to watch TV. Patrick doesn't recall whether they had locked the glass doors after their entry, and that question has repeatedly bothered him since. He left her condo around 1 a.m. in the early morning hours of October 9th, instructing Michelle to lock the door after him, as he always did. Less than an hour after he left, a neighbor reported hearing Michelle's 2 colleagues barking furiously, accompanied by someone yelling, but they didn't investigate or call police. Much later in the day, her roommate would find her body lying on the living room floor. They would find the contents of Michelle's purse strewn about, but it did not appear to be a robbery or burglary, and there were no signs of forced entry. However, they were able to obtain the telephone cord used to kill Michelle. An autopsy conducted by the medical examiner's office found that Michelle's cause of death was strangulation and the manner of death was determined to be a homicide. Numerous possible suspects were identified and interviewed, but after an exhaustive investigation and all leads followed, the case went cold. Through the years, detectives attempted several ways of identifying potential suspects. In 1996, some 90 potential suspects were contacted and interviewed, with many of them providing DNA samples for examination, but a suspect was not identified. Then in June 2000, more DNA testing revealed there were 2 male DNA profiles collected at the time of the murder. One was from her boyfriend, who had been eliminated as a suspect, and one was from another unknown male. A year later, the unknown male's DNA profile was entered into Cody's, but there was never a match. In September of 2020, authorities began using investigative genetic genealogy, which took 9 months for them to discover who the DNA belonged to. 18 years old at the time, the DNA belonged to John Patrick Hogan, or Pat as he went by. He was born in 1961 in Arizona and moved to Santee sometime in the 70s and went to Santana High School. In 1979, he joined the U.S. Air Force and was stationed in New Mexico and lived in California, Idaho, and Arizona. He died in 2004 at the age of 42 in Phoenix from a drug overdose, exactly 40 years to the day since the murder of Michelle. Investigators say Hogan was living about a mile from the complex at the time of the murder and had friends that lived in the condo that he often visited. Because Hogan is dead, sheriff's detectives tracked down his relatives, who provided DNA samples that helped confirm the identification. Michelle's parents are now in their 80s, and although they now know who murdered their daughter 41 years ago, they say it does not bring them closure, mostly because he never faced justice. Her mother says there isn't a weekend that goes by where she doesn't visit her daughter at Mount Hope Cemetery in San Diego. Sadly, she was even mugged once while visiting the grave site. Even worse, one day both Louise and Raymond pulled up for a visit and found an older couple had been attacked by 3 men with the lady's cane, and they even tried to rape her. Louise no longer feels safe visiting alone, and Raymond always goes with her, and they make sure to take protection. Case of Christy Wilson. Christy Wilson was born on January 10, 1978 in San Jose, California. She attended Gunderson High School and later earned a business degree from California State University, Chico. Her parents, Debbie Boyd and Patrick Boyd, described her as an exceptional student and athlete. After college, Christy landed a job at a tech company near Sacramento, where she worked until the high-tech crisis led to her job loss. In her free time, she enjoyed playing blackjack at a local casino where she met her boyfriend, Danny Berlando. Initially, Christy's relationship with Danny was quite harmonious, and her family and friends thought they made a great couple. However, things took a turn for the worse after they moved to Sacramento together. Christy started showing up with bruises, but she wouldn't talk about how she got them. Following her job loss, Christy returned to her parents' home in San Jose. She eventually received a job offer in San Francisco and decided to start fresh. On October 4, 2005, Christy Wilson went to Sacramento to collect her remaining belongings. However, just 2 days later, her boyfriend Danny Berlando contacted her parents to report that she had vanished. He claimed to have searched for her by contacting local jails, hospitals, and friends before reaching out to them. The police were also informed about Christy's disappearance. According to Danny, Christy visited his apartment on October 4th. He then went to dinner with his family while Christy went to the Thunder Valley Casino. This was the last time he saw her. It's worth noting that Danny's family didn't get along with Christy, which is why he attended the family dinner without her. The tension between the families was due to concerns about Christy's safety. Christy's family had noticed bruises on her body, suggesting that Danny had been physically abusing her. Christy's stepfather, Patrick Boyd, was particularly upset when he found out about the abuse. He wanted to confront Danny, but Christy's mother, Debbie Boyd, intervened to prevent a confrontation. Danny Berlando was 31 years old when Christy disappeared. He had recently lost his job as a car salesman. About a month prior to Christy's disappearance, the police were called to their residence after neighbors reported hearing Christy screaming. Although the police found that they had been arguing, they made up quickly and no further action was taken. When Christy went missing, Danny was the primary suspect due to their previous altercation. His decision to wait nearly 48 hours before reporting her missing to the police raised suspicions that he might have used this time to destroy evidence. However, Danny cooperated fully with the investigation, allowing police to examine his phone records, credit card activity, computer, apartment, and car. Despite being a suspect, no evidence of foul play was found. Danny had an alibi for the time Christy went missing, having attended a family dinner. Before reporting her disappearance, he attempted to contact Christy 78 times, but she did not answer. The police interviewed Christy's friends and family and reviewed her phone and credit card activities, but found no activity on her bank account since October 4th. Christy's family and the police worked together to find her. They searched the area with dogs, volunteers, and a police helicopter. Her family asked people to share any information they had about Christy's whereabouts. Danny searched for Christy on his own and visited the Thunder Valley Casino. The casino staff couldn't give him any useful information. However, he found Christy's car in the parking lot. The investigators arrived at the casino and confirmed Christy's car was still in the parking lot. This finding caused confusion rather than answers. There were no signs of a fight or other suspicious activities around her car. The big questions were whether Christy left the casino on her own and why her car remained there. Detectives reviewed security footage inside and outside the casino, hoping to understand what had happened. At the same time, the police conducted another search of Christy and Danny's apartment, but it yielded no results. Meanwhile, Christy's stepfather, Patrick, a police officer, organized a search of a nearby river, but nothing was found. The investigation shifted its focus to Thunder Valley Casino, where Christy was last seen. Using her player's card, investigators tracked her movements and discovered that she played blackjack around 11 p.m. The casino's recordings showed Christy sitting at a table with a man, but Danny was nowhere to be seen. The man and Christy appeared to be communicating, congratulating each other on wins and offering comfort when they lost. They spent about 6 hours together at the casino, during which the man was seen putting his hand on Christy's shoulder. Christy had a night of mixed results. She began well, winning and keeping a good count of the cards. However, as the evening progressed, her luck turned and she started to lose. As she consumed more drinks, Christy became increasingly agitated and lost control. The casino staff eventually asked her to leave, but the man intervened, saying, "Don't worry, I'll take care of this beauty." Shortly after, the man and Christy left the casino together, as captured on camera. During a visit to Thunder Valley, detectives made a significant discovery when casino employees found a mobile phone under a blackjack table. The phone belonged to Christy, and it's possible she had unknowingly dropped it. This development hindered the police's plan to track Christy's location through her phone. Further investigation of the CCTV footage revealed that Christy and a man she had met at the casino left the blackjack table and went to the parking lot 4 minutes later. A white car, later identified as belonging to the man, left the parking lot while Christy's vehicle remained in place. The detectives suspected that Christy might have left with the man in his car. The police needed to determine whether Christy had willingly accompanied the man or if he had forced her into the car. After analyzing players' car data, detectives identified the man as Mario Flavio Garcia, a 53-year-old family man from Auburn with a successful IT career. As the investigation progressed, the detectives discovered that the white car seen in the CCTV footage belonged to Mario Garcia, making him the primary suspect in Christy's disappearance. However, the footage showed that Mario Garcia appeared to be alone in the car when he left the parking lot, and Christy never returned to her vehicle. Mario Garcia had stayed in the parking lot for 3 minutes and 41 seconds, raising questions about what might have occurred between him and Christy during that time. Detectives investigating Mario Garcia's life discovered a stark contrast between his public and private persona. While he was a respected community member and football coach, he also had a dark history. 25 years prior, Mario had been arrested for kidnapping his ex-girlfriend, taking her to a secluded location, and forcing her into a sexual act at gunpoint. Despite the severity of the crime, the case was plea bargained down to assault with a deadly weapon, resulting in a lenient sentence of 18 months probation. This was not the only instance where Mario's caught the attention of police. In another incident, Mario was involved in a tumultuous relationship with Lynette Smith. In 1979, Mario, Lynette, and her mother, Violet Davis, spent Christmas together. After dinner, The three of them got into Lynette's car, which subsequently crashed into a river near Oakland Airport. Mario, the sole survivor, claimed Lynette was driving, but investigators could not confirm this. Violet Davis's body was found in a car, while Lynette's body was not recovered until a week later. The incident was initially believed to be an accident, and no one was charged in connection with the deaths. After collecting the available information, investigators interviewed Mario about Christy Wilson. He maintained he was unaware of her disappearance and stated that they left the casino together, parted ways politely after exchanging goodbyes, and went in different directions. Although he claimed to have headed home immediately, his words couldn't be confirmed or disputed through the casino's CCTV footage. Nonetheless, by reviewing security recordings from surrounding locations, investigators ascertained Mario lied. CCTV evidence outside of the casino caught Mario heading the opposite way of his claimed direction after they were separated. Mario claimed to have gone straight home and fallen asleep at 8:30 a.m. after leaving the casino. However, his wife refused to cooperate with the police, leaving detectives unable to verify his alibi. A review of Mario's cell phone records revealed discrepancies in his story. A call to his wife at 7:51 a.m. was made from a cell tower located far from his house, indicating he did not go home immediately after the casino. Mario also stated that he arrived at work at 9 a.m., but a colleague reported that he was late, arriving around 10 a.m. Further investigation revealed that Mario had scratches on his arm and a bruise under one eye the day after Christy Wilson's disappearance. When questioned, Mario attributed the injuries to a fall from a tree while pruning. However, detectives were skeptical of this explanation, as it is unlikely that someone would prune trees at night. The police asked a forensic expert to examine Mario Garcia's injuries. The expert found that the scratches on Mario's face and body didn't match the kind of injuries you'd get from falling out of a tree. There were 4 parallel scratches on his face and 3 more on the left side of his chest. This was suspicious because Christy Wilson was right-handed. The police suspected Mario was involved in Christy's disappearance, so they got a search warrant for his car, home, and computer. Mario had claimed he went home after saying goodbye to Christy in the parking lot, but as investigators searched his car, they started to think Christy was probably dead. Mario had tried to clean up his car, washing both the inside and outside, and even throwing away the trunk mat. However, he hadn't been able to get rid of all the evidence. Initially, investigators found a small, unremarkable spot on the car seat that was later confirmed to be blood. However, the sample was not suitable for DNA analysis. Further examination of the vehicle revealed 2 long hairs and small blood splatters on the back door of the trunk. The hairs were matched to the missing person, Christy. Further examination of the bloodstains showed that they contained DNA from both Mario and Christy, which disagreed with Mario's statement that he and Christy had separated in the parking lot. This evidence suggested a physical altercation between Mario and Christy. A review of Mario's search history showed that he had been researching forensic toxicology in visiting websites that described how to secretly administer drugs to someone's drink on a date. This led investigators to suspect that Christy may have been a random victim who was targeted by Mario after they sat together at a table. It was possible that Mario had spiked her drink. To prove this, the police needed to find Christy's body. A thorough search of Garcia's 5-acre property was conducted, but unfortunately, no new leads were discovered. Mario Garcia was arrested and charged with kidnapping and murder despite the absence of Christy Wilson's body. He maintained his innocence throughout the trial, which began on September 11, 2006. Prosecutors presented evidence suggesting that Mario had met Christy at a blackjack table, left the casino with her, attacked and killed her, and then hid her body. During the trial, Mario questioned the validity of the evidence, pointing out that only Christy's DNA was found on his car door, while the DNA of his family members and others who had been in the car was not detected. He suggested that the police had planted Christy's DNA as evidence. Mario stated to the court that he would not request leniency or pardon, claiming that he was innocent and did not commit the crime. However, the jury found him guilty on January 11, 2007, and he was sentenced to 59 years to life in prison. After the sentencing, Christy's family held out hope that Mario Garcia would finally reveal the location of her body. However, he refused to cooperate. As the years went by, the family struggled to move on with their lives, which had been forever changed by the traumatic experience. Mario's repeated appeals only added to their distress, despite being unsuccessful. The ongoing appeals prevented the family from finding closure and moving on with their lives. In 2018, Mario offered to provide information about Christy's body in exchange for an early release from prison. However, Christy's mother, Debbie Boyd, was unwilling to negotiate with him. She felt that using her daughter's body as a bargaining chip would be unacceptable. The police then turned to Mario's family for assistance, knowing that his ex-wife, Jean, had divorced him after his imprisonment. Jean eventually lost faith in her ex-husband and began to suspect that he was involved in Christy's disappearance and death. As part of their investigation, police spoke with Mario Garcia's sons, Chris and Andy, asking them to recall any details about the days surrounding Christy's disappearance and their father's subsequent arrest. The police were particularly interested in learning about any changes in Mario's behavior during that time. Chris remembered that he had a football game around that time and saw his father working frantically on a tractor on their plot. Mario's eyes had a wild, frantic look that caught Chris off guard. When Chris asked his father to attend his game, Mario firmly refused, saying he's not going. This response struck Chris as out of character for his father. At the request of investigators, Chris accompanied them to his childhood home. Chris showed them the exact location where he had seen his father working on the tractor, which was next to a detached garage near the road, approximately 100 yards from the Mario residence. It became clear that Mario had made a significant effort to conceal any evidence, taking advantage of the 4 or 5 days he had to cover his tracks. Notably, police had previously searched the Mario property with police dogs in 2005, but had found nothing at the time. In a new development, investigators took a different approach in August 2020. They hired a company that specializes in ground-penetrating radar technology to scan the 5-acre property owned by Mario Garcia. The technicians identified 8 potential locations with voids or pockets beneath the surface. After digging at the first 2 sites, they found nothing. However, at the 3rd location, which was the same spot where Mario Garcia had been digging with a tractor, the police discovered a skeleton. Further examination confirmed that the remains belonged to Christy Wilson 15 years after she went missing. Although the exact cause of Christy's death remains unknown, experts determined that she had suffered a broken arm and nose. The investigators, who had been working on the case for 15 years, traveled to Arizona to personally inform Christy's mother, Debbie Boyd, about the discovery. The news brought a mix of sadness and relief to Christy's family, who could finally find closure and say goodbye to their daughter. Placer County Sheriff Devin Bell announced that Christy Wilson's case has been solved thanks to efforts by his team. This was achieved without the cooperation of Mario Garcia, a convicted murderer who is currently in prison. Mario, 67, had refused to provide any information to help the family find closure. According to Christy's mother, Debbie Boyd, this news brings her family peace and marks the end of a painful chapter. She praised the perseverance of the police and thanked them for their tireless efforts. Notably, Mario had died of pneumonia in 2020, but even his death had brought some peace to the family. Mario had never pleaded guilty to any involvement in Christy's disappearance, despite her remains being found on Mario's plot in 2005. Elizabeth Emma Breck is described as spiritual, outgoing, and very involved in the Buddhist community. She was a teacher at the Tucson High School and had 2 adult daughters. When she was 46 years old, she was seen a psychiatrist for PTSD related to being sexually assaulted. She was advised by her psychiatrist to check into the Sierra Tucson Behavioral Health Center in Saddlebrook, Arizona. The 160-acre behavioral health facility has a reputation of being rehab to the stars. And on January 10, 2019, she checked in and planned to complete a 30-day program. That evening, she called her daughter to let her know of her plans. The intake staff determined Elizabeth was not a threat to herself or others and was released at 9 a.m. Sunday to move into the residential unit for the remainder of her stay. The residential unit, or the general living quarters, is an area that is not on lockdown. She was last seen at 3 p.m. and at some point later in the afternoon, she went missing. Her tracking bracelet, car keys, and personal belongings were found in her assigned room, and the tracking bracelet had been destroyed. She left her car at the hospital and is believed to have taken only her driver's license and some cash with her when she disappeared, but left her cell phone behind. It was 30 degrees that night, and she would not have survived long without shelter. The next month, her brother filed complaints against Sierra Tucson with the Arizona Department of Health Services and the Joint Commission alleging negligence. Her family alleges the facility didn't share information with them or the private investigator they hired to find her. There was no electronic surveillance to ensure patient safety, and Elizabeth wasn't provided with a phone to call her parents who live outside the U.S. The rehab facility reportedly told local investigators that Elizabeth left the building on her own volition and was not in crisis at the time of her disappearance. However, her parents believed she was having a mental breakdown, and that played a role in her disappearance from the facility. Her family also says she loved Catalina State Park, and they believe she may have tried to walk there on foot from the facility. Sierra Tucson has faced many previous state investigations. Arizona DHS records indicate a pattern of fines against the facility spanning back years before Elizabeth went there for treatment. In 2019, just 4 months after Elizabeth was last seen, the family of 20-year-old Stephen Joe was awarded a $5 million settlement for his wrongful death in 2014. Stephen was in treatment for drug rehab and mental health issues and died from a fatal overdose only 6 days after checking in. The lawsuit accused Sierra Tucson of medical negligence for, among other things, not following up on Joe's suicidal thoughts he had been expressing during intake and not providing the needed supervision or follow-up. Since 2014, 3 other patients have also been found dead at Sierra Tucson. One was a retired medical doctor whose body was found 2 weeks after he disappeared in bushes located on the facility's property, but it was too decomposed to determine the cause of death. The state also gave Sierra Tucson 6 citations in 2016 for failing to protect the health and safety of patients and follow facility policy. The assistant director stated that the facilities do a comprehensive assessment of a patient's needs and risks during intake, but they are not required to have video surveillance. He also said unless patients are court-ordered to be there, they're legally allowed to walk out the front door. Elizabeth's family says that she's close with them and her 2 daughters, and it is very out of character for her to vanish, and they fear that foul play might be involved. As of today, Elizabeth has never been found, and this case remains unsolved. Christine Ann Nelson was born December 14, 1949 to Floyd and Eleanor Horn. At the age of 36, she lived in Eugene, Oregon, and worked as a secretary for the University of Oregon. She was described as an extremely outgoing and athletic person that enjoyed swimming, windsurfing, baseball, and horseback riding. She and her husband, Philip Nelson, were having marital problems and the couple separated, but he begged her to come back. Soon after, on August 22, 1986, the two would leave Oregon and head to Carson City, Nevada to pick up 2 Studebakers her husband bought for his car collection. She is known to have arrived safely in Nevada, but no one else besides Philip reported seeing her back home in Oregon. Philip says they went home together afterwards, and Christine drove off on her motorcycle early the next morning on August 24th and never returned. Philip reported her missing the next day, and authorities have no evidence besides his statement to prove that Christine ever made it home from Carson City, Nevada. Christine's motorcycle, along with her helmet, was found shortly after her disappearance outside the Portable Rock Productions quarry in Cottage Grove, Oregon, off I-5 near the Saginaw exit. This location is about 15 miles from their home. Philip stated he believed his wife had run away with another man, and some of Christine's relatives concurred, but other members of her family thought she had disappeared under suspicious circumstances and may have been murdered. Christine's co-workers stated she often had bruises on her body and had told them Philip abused her, but he was never charged in connection with any of the domestic violence incidents. Their marriage was troubled, and the couple separated a few months prior to Christine's disappearance. She had moved back in with her parents, but when Philip begged her to come back, she made a compromise and started spending weekends with him at their house. By the time of her disappearance, was still undecided as to whether to end her marriage. Philip was initially cooperative with the police investigation, but he eventually refused to take the polygraph, hired an attorney, and stopped talking to authorities. In 1993, Christine's mother, Eleanor Horn, sued Philip in a civil suit to have him declare Christine legally dead to prevent him from benefiting from her life insurance and retirement holdings. She claimed that he had killed her daughter, hidden her body, and then moved to Alaska to avoid being prosecuted. Oregon law states that a murderer cannot benefit from their victim's estate. They eventually reached a settlement, and although Philip did not admit guilt, he did release any interest in his missing wife's estate, and she was finally declared legally dead. Her family believes that Philip killed her and disposed of her body either somewhere in the Jasper area where they lived or in Nevada during their trip. Pam Wallace, Christine's younger sister and only remaining relative, has believed for 35 years that her brother-in-law killed her sister in a fit of rage over their deteriorating marriage. As of today, no one has been arrested for her disappearance and possible murder, and this case remains unsolved. The case of Dana Ireland. Dana Marie Ireland was born on December 12, 1968, in Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to John Ireland and Mary Louise Crank. She was the youngest daughter with an older sister, Sandra, who was 7 years her senior. In 1991, when Dana was 23, she visited her sister in Hawaii with her parents. On December 24th, Dana borrowed her sister's bike for a ride. However, she never returned. Her bike, shoe, and a clump of hair were later found on the side of the road, but Dana was nowhere to be seen. The condition of the bike suggested that Dana had been struck by a vehicle. The impact was severe, causing significant damage to the bike's wheels and steering wheel. Unfortunately, hopes that the driver who hit Dana had taken her to the hospital were short-lived. Tragically, Dana was found 5 miles from where her bike was discovered. She had suffered severe injuries to her body and head, and her lower body was exposed. The evidence suggested that Dana had not only been hit by a car, but had also been taken advantage of while she was vulnerable. Nurse Jerry Gallagher is haunted by a traumatic event that occurred on Christmas Eve 1991. A friend, Brian, arrived at her home on Satellite Road in a rural area 25 miles southeast of Hilo. He had found she, Dana Ireland, severely injured and in need of medical attention. Gallagher, who was licensed to provide care, accompanied Brian to the scene just a mile from her house. Upon arrival, she found Dana lying on the ground, naked from the waist down, with severe bruises on the inner sides of her legs. Gallagher attempted to administer first aid using a kit, but Dana's most critical injury was a severe head wound on the back of her skull. When Gallagher inquired about her identity, Dana's response was incoherent, seeming to utter the words, "Island." Gallagher then asked who was responsible for her condition. Dana's answers remained unclear. Dana did, however, repeatedly request Gallagher to return her keys so she could drive home. Gallagher made an effort to keep her awake while awaiting further assistance. Due to the area's lack of phone services, significant delays occurred before an ambulance finally arrived more than 2 hours after the initial call for help. Moreover, further complications arose when the emergency services dispatcher mistakenly relayed the wrong location for the incident. These factors collectively resulted in an additional 34-minute delay for Dana to receive the medical attention she required. Gallagher had considered driving Dana to the hospital himself, but she was worried that moving her could cause further injury. She has since struggled with the decision and the fact that it took so long for help to arrive. An ambulance finally brought Dana to Hilo Hospital at 7:56 p.m. Unbeknownst to her parents, John and Mary Louise, who were searching for her, Dana was the injured woman being treated at the hospital. They had found her damaged bicycle by the side of the road and were trying to locate her. At the time, Mary thought someone had hit Dana and taken her to the hospital. John stayed near the bike while Mary and their eldest daughter Sandra went to the hospital to look for Dana. When the ambulance arrived with Dana, Mary and Sandra were already there. Despite the doctor's best efforts, they were unable to save Dana. She was pronounced dead at 12:25 a.m. due to severe injuries sustained in a motor vehicle accident, including blood loss and trauma to her head, pelvis, and abdomen. Dana's family was shocked by her death, which permanently altered their lives. As time passed, they would face another challenge, a long and arduous search for suspects and subsequent trials. The police investigation was described by local newspapers as intense. They discovered a T-shirt at the crime scene that belonged to the perpetrator. They also seized a sheet from the hospital with semen stains on it, which was crucial evidence since Dana had semen on her body when she was admitted. Furthermore, a bite mark on Dana's body matched the teeth print of her attacker. The authorities obtained a DNA sample from the perpetrator, but this was of limited use in 1991. The tire tracks from the bike and the secluded area where it was found provided few leads. Despite interviewing residents, the investigators could not find any witnesses who saw the car that hit Dana's bike, likely due to the remote location, poor road conditions, which deterred cars from traveling there frequently. The investigation into the Dana Ireland case had reached a dead end due to a lack of witnesses and evidence. However, a breakthrough occurred when John Gonsalves contacted the Hawaii County Police in May 1994. Gonsalves was involved in a high-profile case involving illegal substances, but he received a suspended sentence due to his cooperation with the police. Gonsalves revealed that his half-brother, Frank Pauline, had important information about the Dana Ireland case. Frank Pauline stated that brothers Albert Ian Schweitzer and Sean Schweitzer were involved in the attack on Dana Ireland. The Schweitzer family lived next door to the Frank Pauline family, and their families did not get along. According to Frank Pauline, he was present when the Schweitzers attacked Dana Ireland. They allegedly ran her over, put her in the trunk, and took her to another location. Based on Frank Pauline's statements, the police made Albert Schweitzer, Sean Schweitzer, and Frank Pauline the main suspects in the case. Frank Pauline Jr. was born on April 27, 1973, in Fremont, California, to Frank Sr. and Patricia Pauline. He grew up in Puna, Hawaii, where he became a father of 3 sons by the age of 20. However, Frank had a history of run-ins with the law, starting at the age of 9. By February 8, 1983, Frank Pauline had been caught in a burglary. As he got older, the severity of his crimes increased. In February 1994, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for harassment and robbery. Despite this, Pauline continued to commit crimes, earning him the nickname Walking Crime Wave from prosecutors. After being sentenced, Pauline was taken into custody to start his prison term. However, he managed to escape and was classified as a fugitive. He was eventually recaptured in Honolulu a few days later. 3 months after Pauline received a 10-year sentence, his brother John Gonsalves contacted the authorities and provided information about the Dana Ireland case. Pauline and Gonsalves decided to cooperate with the investigation, which could potentially reduce Pauline's sentence. John Gonsalves was initially a questionable source of information, but after speaking with investigators, the case against him for illegal substances was closed and he received a suspended sentence. Pauline claimed to have information about the Dana Ireland case and was interrogated by investigators from the Big Island. The 90-minute interrogation took place in Honolulu, where Pauline was in custody. During the interrogation, Pauline provided details about the attack on Dana Ireland and reconstructed the crime scene on the Big Island, showing detectives the locations he mentioned earlier. Pauline told detectives that on December 24, 1991, brothers Albert Ian and Sean Schweitzer picked him up at his home in a purple Volkswagen Beetle. Albert Ian was driving. Before they saw a woman on the side of the road, they stopped to take illegal substances. As they approached an intersection near Kapaho, they saw she standing on the side of the road. Pauline recalled Albert Ian pointing her out, saying, "Look at that girl." But they initially continued driving. Albert Ian then suggested turning the car around so he could talk to she. As they drove back, traveling at 40 to 45 miles per hour, Albert Ian failed to stop in time and accidentally hit she, later identified as Dana Ireland. After hitting Dana, the trio got out of the car, loaded her into the trunk, and continued driving. A short distance later, they stopped and removed Dana from the car. Despite being injured, she was still alive. Pauline claimed he did not assault Dana, unlike the Schweitzer brothers. However, he said something that had severe consequences. According to Pauline, Albert Ian insisted that he find a tire iron and hit Dana on the head to end her suffering. Pauline's initial statement to the police was written down and he signed it, confirming that he testified voluntarily, without coercion, threats, or influence from substances. He was later moved to the Maui Community Correctional Center for protection due to threats from fellow inmates. However, 2 years later, Pauline retracted his statement, claiming he fabricated his story at his stepbrother's request to avoid jail. He admitted he was not present during the attack but had information about those responsible. Pauline explained that he lied about being there to make his information credible and to avoid being accused of perjury, but perjury was not one of the charges he faced. On July 30th, 1997, Frank Pauline was charged with the murder of Dana Ireland after signing a confession claiming he had struck her with a tire iron. However, the confession raised suspicions, as when investigators took him to the Big Island, he was unable to identify the exact location of the crime or where Dana's body was found. This led investigators to question the truthfulness of Pauline's confession. Pauline eventually retracted his confession, fearing that if he continued to lie, he could be charged with perjury. His retraction was motivated in part by his realization that his half-brother, Albert Gonzalez, was innocent and being wrongly accused. In the end, Gonzalez was able to avoid major charges related to a separate crime, and in exchange, he agreed to testify against Pauline at his trial. At the time of the arrest, DNA testing technology was not as advanced as it is today. Despite this, the authorities collected DNA samples from Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers. They also analyzed biological fluids from the gurney sheet used to transport Dana Ireland to the hospital and swabs from her body. However, the results were unexpected. The DNA of Frank Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers did not match the DNA of the perpetrator. Although the charges against the three men were dropped, the investigation continued. The prosecution suggested that someone else must have been involved, as other evidence also failed to implicate Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers. For example, the teeth of the Schweitzer brothers and Pauline did not match the bite mark found on the victim's chest. Furthermore, no traces of Dana Ireland's blood or hair were found in Albert Ian Schweitzer's Volkswagen, which he had acquired only a month after her death. External pressures, including those from the Dana Ireland family, the public, and the press, may have influenced the course of events in the investigation into Dana Ireland's death. Albert Ian Schweitzer was 20 years old at the time of Dana Ireland's murder and had only traffic-related infractions on his record. Sean Schweitzer, who was 16 when Dana Ireland died, received charges in connection with her death at the age of 23. Around that time, Sean also faced unrelated charges of fourth-degree assault for inappropriately touching a 15-year-old girl when he was 16. He received a sentence of 180 days in prison and 1 year of probation. Despite their records showing a pattern of questionable behavior, DNA testing cleared all three suspects involved in the Dana Ireland case of her murder. However, this finding was likely undermined by the unrelated convictions that surfaced in their pasts. 5 days after Frank Pauline's initial statement to the police, investigators searched the Schweitzer family home and seized Albert Ian's 1957 Volkswagen Beetle as evidence. Both Sean and Albert Ian claimed they were not with Frank Pauline on the night of the crime, although they admitted to knowing him. Sean stated that he was at home on Christmas Eve, while Albert Ian said he was either at home or at his uncle's house. Albert Ian also explained how he acquired his car, initially denying that he had done any bodywork on it. He revealed that the car was originally purple, but he repainted it yellow because it wasn't his preferred color. The Schweitzer brothers' lawyers believed that Frank Pauline had falsely accused them due to a long-standing feud between their families. Nevertheless, the prosecution continued to pursue the case. On May 5, 1999, just days before the statute of limitations expired for some of the crimes committed against Dana Ireland, the police received a statement from Michael Ortiz, a cellmate of the Schweitzers and an associate of Gonzalez. This new information was seen as a potential breakthrough in the case. During questioning by authorities, Michael Ortiz claimed that Albert Ian Schweitzer had confessed to his involvement in the crime. Based on this testimony, Frank Pauline and the Schweitzer brothers were recharged in connection with Dana Ireland's death just 2 weeks later. This development raised suspicions and distrust among the public, as the information had come from a questionable source and had been revealed just days before the statute of limitations was set to expire. Frank Pauline was the first to face trial. The proceedings were highly emotional. Pauline professed his innocence, stating that he had lied when he initially confessed to being involved in Dana's murder. When taking the stand, Mary Ireland recounted receiving the devastating news about her daughter. She described the distressing scene: a bicycle on the road, a shoe, and a lock of hair. However, the witnesses who linked Pauline to the crime had checkered pasts and stood to gain from implicating him. Among those who benefited from Pauline being found guilty was his half-brother, Gonzalez, who became a witness for the prosecution. Witness William Chung, who also testified against Pauline, said Pauline confessed his involvement in this crime. However, when asked if he saw Pauline in the courtroom, he pointed to another person, although Frank Pauline was there. The jury also saw Dana Ireland's bike, shorts, top, underwear, and a Jimmy's t-shirt recovered from the scene. Not one of those items had DNA from Pauline or the Schweitzers. To get around the lack of scientific evidence, Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ashida insisted that the Jimmy's t-shirt covered in Dana Ireland's blood belonged to Pauline. "We're not afraid of that evidence. We embrace it," Ashida said. Then, that same DNA technology works both ways for the defense and the prosecution. Pauline's lawyer protested, saying the t-shirt wasn't even Frank's size. Nevertheless, the jury found that the evidence and assumptions presented at the trial were enough to convict Pauline. Pauline's guilty verdict and 180-year sentence were handed down despite forensic evidence proving his confession was false. The next trial was that of Albert Ian Schweitzer, who knew about Pauline's sentence and was surprised when prosecutors offered him a plea deal, given the lack of physical evidence. Albert Ian Schweitzer rejected the offer, maintaining his innocence. The prosecutor claimed Schweitzer's Volkswagen Beetle was involved in the crime, but several facts contradicted this assertion. Witnesses in the area where Dana was found reported seeing a pickup truck, not the Beetle, and forensic analysis of Schweitzer's car turned up no evidence linking it to the crime. Furthermore, Schweitzer only became the official owner of the Volkswagen in January 1992. Albert Ian Schweitzer was sentenced to 130 years in prison based on the testimony of Michael Ortiz, who claimed Albert Ian had confessed to the crime and evidence of scratches on Albert Ian's car bumper. After seeing his brother convicted, Sean Schweitzer initially wanted to prove his innocence, but eventually decided to take a plea deal due to concerns about the justice system failing him again. As part of his agreement with the prosecutor's office, Sean Schweitzer was required to testify against his brother and Frank Pauline, who were accused of playing a role in Dana Ireland's death. He was also required to take a polygraph test to prove his honesty. The polygraph test was administered on March 24, 2000 by an examiner from the State Attorney General's office. However, the test results showed that Sean was not truthful about his involvement in the crime. Despite this, he was still allowed to plead guilty to the lesser charges of kidnapping and involuntary deprivation of life. There was a discrepancy in the court records regarding the polygraph test results. Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ashida initially stated that Sean had failed the test but later claimed that he had passed it. Sean was ultimately sentenced to 5 years probation with credit for 18 months served. In an interview after his release, Sean stated that the decision to accept the plea deal was made by his family, who were concerned about the potential impact on his parents if both brothers were imprisoned. His brother, Albert Ian, who was later sentenced to 130 years in prison, recalled advising Sean to accept the deal to avoid serving life in prison, as imprisonment of both brothers might have been too stressful for their parents. Years later, Sean still feels remorseful for testifying against his brother and making a deal with the prosecutor. He and his family have struggled to move on from the case, and Sean has had a hard time finding a job due to the community's knowledge of the case. Community members made remarks about the case for years, causing Sean to experience disappointment and frustration. After being wrongfully convicted, Albert Ian Schweitzer and his family refused to give up the fight. In 2005, Albert Ian applied to the Innocence Project, an organization dedicated to re-examining convictions using new evidence and investigative techniques. The case eventually gained momentum in 2010 when students from the University of Hawaii lawyers and professors started reinvestigating the old files from the Dana Ireland case. Local prosecutors authorized the investigation, which has spanned several years. Throughout this process, efforts continued to deliver the desired outcome, justice for Albert Ian. The goal was to rectify a miscarriage of justice and bring about restitution. The investigation's findings and the subsequent actions taken will bring truth and closure to the matter. Ultimately, the hope is that justice will prevail and the issue will be laid to rest. Years passed and Mary Louise Ireland, Dana's mother, eventually passed away on her 92nd birthday in 2016. Meanwhile, Linda battled breast cancer, which made it difficult for her to visit her son, Albert Ian. When Linda finally had the chance to see Albert Ian for the very last time, she was heartbroken. During this emotionally charged visit, Albert Ian expressed a final wish to his mother. He didn't want her to leave him, and the thought of saying goodbye was unbearable. He had always found it hard to see the people he loved leave, especially after losing his grandmother. Albert Ian confided in his mother that it was his greatest fear, losing those closest to him, and that he never wanted to have to say goodbye to her again. A DNA expert, Nancy Din, testified at the trial after retesting evidence using advanced methods that were not available during the original trials. She explained that technology has improved significantly since 2000, allowing for the detection of details that were previously invisible. Contrary to the 2000 authorities' claim that Frank Pauline's and the Schweitzer brothers' DNA was not on the t-shirt due to excessive amounts of Dana Ireland's blood, scientists from the Innocence Project used modern technology to distinguish between Dana's DNA and other DNA on the t-shirt. They also found seminal fluid and sweat from the armpit on the t-shirt. Nancy Din confirmed that the DNA found on the t-shirt and Dana's body belonged to the same person. However, she stated that this person was neither Frank Pauline nor one of the Schweitzer brothers. Following Nancy Din's testimony, a tire tread expert remotely testified, stating that the tire tracks found at both crime scenes could not have been made by the Schweitzer brothers' Volkswagen. In his opinion, the tracks were likely left by a larger vehicle such as a truck, SUV, or van. The final witness to testify was dentist Adam Freeman. Dana Ireland had what appeared to be a human bite mark on her left breast, according to the prosecutor's initial assessment. However, forensic expert Freeman disputed this claim, stating it was not a bite mark. This case highlights the flaws in forensic science, particularly in the analysis of bite marks. Freeman testified. After the witnesses finished testifying, District Court Judge Peter Kubota delivered his verdict. He stated that the new DNA evidence, along with the tire tread evidence, the disputed bite mark evidence, and Sean Schweitzer's recantation collectively proved that a jury in a new trial would likely find Albert Ian Schweitzer not guilty. Therefore, Kubota declared the conviction vacated and ordered Mr. Albert Ian Schweitzer's immediate release from custody. With these words, spoken 23 years after Albert Ian Schweitzer's guilty verdict and 25 years after his arrest, Albert Ian was suddenly exonerated and freed. Judge Kubota then addressed Albert Ian Schweitzer with heartfelt words. With 1/3 of his life still ahead of him, the judge offered a choice to live in anger and resentment towards the process and the people who had wronged him, or to find a new sense of freedom. Kubota suggested that Albert Ian make the most of this opportunity, surrounded by his family, who had come to support him. Freed from his handcuffs, Albert Ian hugged his lawyers and then his family members, including some he had not seen in decades. His mother was overcome with emotion in his arms. Albert Ian's young son, who had grown up without his father, was also in the courtroom and shared a hug with him. His younger brother, Sean, was there too with a warm smile and open arms. As a result of Albert Ian's acquittal, his brother Sean's lawyer is now seeking to have his own criminal record cleared. The story serves as a reminder of the tragic fate of Frank Pauline, who died in prison in New Mexico in 2015. Pauline was attacked by a fellow inmate, Daniel Hood, who was serving time for taking 2 lives. On April 27, 2015, Hood attacked Pauline in the recreation yard at the Southern New Mexico Correctional Facility, striking him 3 times on the back of the head with a rock. The motive behind the attack was Hood's belief that Pauline was a snitch. Despite efforts by the medical staff, Pauline could not be saved. In response, his family's lawyer plans to file a petition for his posthumous rehabilitation. Albert Ian Schweitzer finds the transition from prison life to freedom extremely difficult. He shares that adjusting to life outside of prison has been more challenging than he anticipated. Most days are a struggle with anxiety. While Albert Ian may be eligible for compensation for wrongful imprisonment, which could award him $50,000 for each year spent in prison, the process is not straightforward. His lawyers are working diligently to ensure he receives the compensation he is owed. The Dana Ireland case remains unsolved 3 decades later, but investigators are hopeful that advances in DNA testing and genealogy will help them identify the person responsible for destroying the Dana family's life. James Hendrickson was born May 15, 1979, and was nicknamed Jimmy. In 1991, was 12 years old, lived in the 200 block of East Delano Street in Tucson, Arizona, and was scheduled to enter the 6th grade at Amphi Middle School in the fall. In June of that year, his mother Deborah and 17-year-old sister Tammy went to Douglas, Arizona to meet the family of Tammy's boyfriend, but Jimmy chose not to go, so he was left to stay with a babysitter instead. Jimmy and the babysitter Angelica, who was also a friend of the family, went to a football game that night and a barbecue with Angelica's 4-year-old nephew named Justin. Angelica then let the boys go with her cousin to stay the night at her sister's house near Prince and Stone Avenue in the 700 block of West Paris Promenade of Tucson. The cousin was a middle-aged man that had a warrant at the time for a sexual deviancy allegation. Jimmy stayed the night playing video games with the 4-year-old boy. When his mother and sister returned to town several days later, they stopped at a store to use the payphone to call his mom's work to let them know they had just made it in a little late due to car trouble and she would be in to work the next day. Her boss then told her that Jimmy was missing and was surprised that she didn't already know. The two then rushed to the police department. They were told that on the morning of June 12th, Jimmy said that he was walking home, which was about a mile away. However, witnesses reported seeing him about 8 o'clock that same night, walking near a Circle K convenience store in the vicinity of West Grant and North Oracle Roads. The man he was staying the night with was given a polygraph exam and failed. He is a suspect in the disappearance, but his name has never been publicly released and he has not faced any charges in the case. Jimmy did not have a history of running away from home, but he was considered a streetwise boy and the police initially believed he was a runaway and not missing. His sister said that it wasn't until much later that the investigation determined foul play may have been involved. Jimmy's father lived in Michigan at the time of his disappearance and had not been in contact with his son for several years before he went missing. The 4-year-old who was with James before he disappeared told police he knew where Jimmy was. He said 2 bad men had come and wrapped him in a blanket and took him away to Mexico. The boy led them to the Santa Cruz River adjacent to a local sports park and said that was where Mexico was, but a search of the area turned up nothing. 25 years after his disappearance, his sister Tammy requested a copy of her brother's missing persons file, which was an inch thick. After painstakingly going through the stack of reports, she realized that her brother was not just missing, but that something bad had happened to him. Despite all this, no one has been charged with his disappearance, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Cookie Sharon Jacobson was born September 16, 1949, and lived in Tempe, Arizona. In 1998, she was a 49-year-old former nurse with a 16-year-old son named Aaron and a 13-year-old daughter named Laura. Cookie had suffered a back injury in a car accident in the past and had to retire from nursing, but started taking night classes in graphic art and computer at a local community college. She lived with her husband and 2 children near McClintock Drive and Southern Avenue in Tempe. On September 21, 1998, her husband Bill says he kissed her goodbye at 7 a.m. and headed to work. That evening, her husband found out she did not attend her night class, nor did she answer the door when a friend came to pick her up, and immediately he became very concerned. It is unclear if her husband was working out of town at this time or not, but he did report her missing the next day, and all of her personal belongings were found in the home. Her children stated that they last saw her when they left for school as she scolded them for being late. 10 days after her disappearance, her son Aaron told police that he had found her dead in bed, and his sister Laura helped him dispose of her body because they were scared that they would be blamed for killing her. He said he wrapped her body in a yellow bedsheet and placed it in a trash can behind their house. Cookie's blood was found in the trash can, but there wasn't enough blood to prove she had died. Apparently, her body lay in the garbage can behind her home the entire time the children were telling police they had no idea where she was. One of Aaron's friends later stated that Aaron and Laura had wanted to kill their mother. Friends of Aaron's told police that he had bragged about having tried to kill his mother the year before by poisoning her and by cutting the brake lines on her car. Aaron was arrested for second-degree murder and Laura for allegedly helping him, but the two were quickly released hours later due to lack of evidence and were not charged with any crime. Her husband passed the lie detector test about whether he knew where his wife was or what happened to her. Aaron, however, failed his lie detector test, and Laura's test was inconclusive. Despite all of this, the family's lawyer described the children as really good kids. Workers at the Butterfield landfill in Mobile, Arizona zoned off an area where they estimated the body would be. This field was roughly 70 feet long, 50 feet wide, and 13 feet deep. After specialized training, 18 Tempe police officers spent 59 days picking through 8,000 tons of waste. The city of Tempe spent $375,000 on searching the landfill. However, Cookie's body was never found, which is apparently the only reason the children have never been charged. Cookie's children remain the prime suspects in her presumed homicide. Aaron and Laura did not have a good relationship with their mother before her disappearance, although there were no reports of domestic violence. Since her disappearance, have both left the Tempe area. Laura has always denied any involvement with her mother's disappearance. Investigators announced that they received a tip vital to the case in May 2003, but they did not release any details about what they had been told, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Case of Rachel Keelley. Rachel was the eldest of 4 children born to John and Rose Keelley. The family consisted of 3 girls and 1 boy, and they were members of the Jehovah's Witness community. They lived in the Inishmore housing estate, which is located near the entrance to the regional park. Rachel was highly involved in her local congregation and devoted to her faith. After completing her education at Ballin College Community School, she pursued a career as a beautician. This was a deliberate choice, as it would allow her more time to engage in missionary work with the local Jehovah's Witness community. In the summer of 2000, Rachel took a trip with one of her sisters to work as an au pair, but she soon returned home. She was known as a kind and gentle girl, and she had a boyfriend who was part of her Jehovah's Witness social circle. On Thursday, the 26th of October 2000, Rachel left her home around 4:30 p.m. with her 2 dogs to take them for a walk in the regional park in Balinkalig. She was very familiar with this park, and even though it was getting dark, she would not have thought twice about going there, as she knew the area well and expected there to be other people around at that time. She had only planned to be gone for about an hour, and her mother would have had her dinner ready when she got back, as she had a Bible study that night and would be going straight out again after dinner. But around an hour later, after Rachel left, her mother Rose heard scratching at the back door. It was the 2 dogs, but no Rachel. It was deemed straight away that something was wrong, and Rose and her youngest daughter Elizabeth headed straight to the park to look for Rachel on the path they knew she usually took. But there was no sign of her. By 7 p.m., the family contacted the police. Friends and family all headed out looking for Rachel again. Rose bought flashlights from the local shop so they could see, as it was pitch dark by now. Nearing 8 p.m. that night, a close family friend would find Rachel dead in the undergrowth, not far from the walking track. She was found fully clothed, face down in the fetal position, covered with some briars and branches from trees. The emergency team were notified, but at this point, it was obvious that Rachel was dead. The police immediately initiated an investigation. An intent was placed around the body of Rachel, and 6 police officers stood guard over the body until the state pathologist, Dr. Harbison, could arrive at the scene to examine the body. Rachel's mother would later say in interviews that this gave her great comfort, knowing that her daughter was not alone and that she was protected in death, even if they couldn't protect her in life. When Dr. Harbison arrived, he spent 3 hours examining the scene. Door-to-door inquiries were started straight away at houses nearest to the park. Rachel had last been seen in the park at 5:15 p.m. She was later buried at St. Oliver's Cemetery in Mahone County, Cork, on the 28th of October. Police put out an appeal to people who might have been in the regional park that evening and might provide valuable leads in the case to help determine who had attacked Rachel. Dr. Harbison, the state pathologist, completed a preliminary examination of Rachel's body and determined that she had died from asphyxiation, but needed to do a further examination to determine exactly how she died, whether by smothering or strangulation. Police were also trying to determine the reason behind the attack. Was it a robbery or a sexual assault? Rachel was found fully clothed, but her clothes seemed to have been tampered with. Police politely questioned known sex offenders and locals, and they also wanted to speak with an elderly man and some teenage girls seen in the area at the time of the killing. CCTV footage in the area was also collected from local businesses, and by the 4th of November it was reported in the local paper that police were looking to collect DNA samples to compare to samples found on Rachel's clothes and under her nails. More than 1,000 males from the area gave samples, but police would not give an indication of what type of material containing DNA was collected from Rachel. On Friday, November 10, 2000, news broke that someone had been arrested for questioning in relation to Rachel's death. It was the arrest of a 16-year-old male who was brought to Garda Station in Cork and questioned that night. The teen appeared before a special sitting of the Cork District Court and was charged with the murder and rape of Rachel. He couldn't be named as he was a minor, but it was said that he was from the Ballincollig area. He was remanded at St. Patrick's Juvenile Centre in Dublin. The trial began on May 1, 2000 at the Central Criminal Court in Dublin. Rose Keelley, Rachel's mother, was the first to take the stand. She had told how the dogs had returned to their home an hour after Rachel left to take them for a walk. She said that her youngest daughter, Elizabeth, and she had gone out to search the park for her daughter around 6 p.m., and they called out for Rachel. Elizabeth said she thought she had heard a scream as they continued to search for Rachel. They met the defendant, and they said hello to him, as they knew him as he was a neighbor who lived around the corner from their house. Rose said she considered asking him if he had seen Rachel, but thought that she might sound paranoid, so she didn't. For boys who had seen the accused on the evening of Rachel's death were also called to testify. They stated that he behaved normally and that they had watched TV at a friend's house around 6:30 p.m. Afterward, they had gone to the regional park to ride motorcycles, but they had left immediately because there was police nearby. The accused had no insurance or road tax for his motorcycle and he had left it behind in the park. Dr. Harbison took the stand and stated that Rachel had been chased down and most likely dragged to the location where she was found. He said that she had been placed in the fetal position after being strangled in a different area. Dr. Harbison also mentioned that there was no evidence of forced sexual assault, but that her clothes were disheveled. The police told the court that the accused had provided a hair and saliva sample, but refused to give a blood sample as he was afraid of needles. Dr. Maureen Smith told the court that the forensic evidence she collected included fibers taken from Rachel's fleece jacket that matched the fibers from a jumper taken from the accused bedroom on the day of his arrest, as well as fibers collected from Rachel's pants that matched the fibers of the jumper he was found with, along with semen recovered from Rachel's undergarments and outerwear that matched the DNA the accused had provided. Dr. Smith's evidence was lengthy, and there were concerns that one of the jurors had fallen asleep during her cross-examination, but the court had assurances that this was not the case, and so the trial continued. On Wednesday, the accused mother said the police came to their house while investigating, and her son was worried about getting in trouble for driving his motorbike without insurance or tax. Someone told him he could get 3 years, so he decided to leave the area, even though she told him not to, as the guardian might think he was involved in Rachel's death. She stated her son was innocent. The accused father testified that his son left school at 14. The accused was a talented athlete and Gaelic footballer who could have played for the Cork junior team. He was the oldest of 4 children from a stable background and good area, living near the Achilles. They knew Rachel casually, as the accused went to school with her brother. The accused also took to the stand and he told the courts that on the day of the killing, he had called to his girlfriend's workplace. They had been seeing each other for around 2 years. He stated police had called to him a week before Rachel was killed, giving him a green form which accused him of dangerous driving and driving without insurance and tax. It was a warning and not a summons, but he knew if he was caught again that night in the park, he'd get done for it. This is why he abandoned the bike and why he was going to run away. He said he had met his friends in the park at 5 p.m. after work and went to his friend's house 10 minutes later, but had to admit he went back to the park at 5:20 p.m. after a former babysitter gave evidence that she had seen him in the park at around 5:30 p.m. that day. He agreed with the evidence his friends gave about them leaving the park at 6:30 p.m. to go watch TV at a friend's house and returning to the park at 8 p.m. when he abandoned his bike. After seeing police, the accused also admitted that he packed his bags to leave after the police contacted him 2 days after Rachel's death. He also admitted providing false information on the questionnaire about his whereabouts. When he tried to leave, he could not get a train or bus because it was the Guinness Jazz Festival that week, making it nearly impossible to find any mode of transportation. The police soon apprehended him, and since he was a minor, he was returned home 2 days later. They called him and took a saliva sample as part of the ongoing investigation. In court, he also stated that he had not seen Rachel for at least a month, and he had no contact or close contact with her. The DNA evidence was challenged by the defense, and a second expert was called to provide testimony. The expert said the test tubes used to collect the samples were not sealed properly, and there was a theoretical possibility that the samples could have been contaminated. But she also stated that this was unlikely, unless it was done intentionally by an individual. Additionally, it was mentioned that all the samples collected were blood samples, except for the accused, who had provided a saliva sample. Closing arguments then began, and the defense stated that the prosecution was blinded by science, and the jury should remember what happened to the Birmingham Six. Anyone not familiar with this case should definitely look into it. And it was possible for forensic evidence and DNA to be incorrect and misleading. The prosecution said that the accused parents had lied in the witness box to protect their son and were helping him to leave the country to go stay with his uncle in the UK and not to visit a girl he knew in Kilkenny. The uncle had moved from Ireland 2 years earlier after being convicted of a serious crime, and served a prison sentence for it. On Tuesday, the 18th of June, the jury returned after 4.5 hours of deliberation, and after being sequestered in a local hotel overnight. They found the defendant guilty of murder and rape by a majority of 10-2. He was sentenced to life for her murder, and the sentence for rape will be determined at a later date in the year. An application for an appeal was denied. The trial lasted 26 days over a period of 7 weeks. The following day, the accused was publicly identified in the press as Ian Horrigan. As he was no longer a minor, he had turned 18. He lived in close proximity to the Keelley family, who had moved house after Rachel's funeral, as they could not bear living so close to the family of the accused. On November 22, 2002, Horrigan appeared in court again to be sentenced for the rape. He received a 10-year sentence to be served concurrently with his life sentence for murder. His request for an appeal was denied. In January 2006, Horrigan applied for leave to appeal in the courts. His legal team argued that the judge's instructions to the jury were misdirected and misleading. The jury should have been informed that forensic evidence is not infallible, and they should have been told that Seaman's body could have been deposited on the scene several days before being discovered. The Court of Criminal Appeal agreed with Horrigan's arguments, and his conviction was overturned. A new trial was ordered, which took place in February 2006. Horrigan admitted to manslaughter, but the state rejected this plea. Dr. Cassidy, who replaced the ill Dr. Harbison, concluded that Rachel died from an arm lock around her neck, leading to cardiac arrest. Horrigan didn't testify this time. The jury deliberated for hours before finding him guilty of rape, but not murder, convicting him of manslaughter instead. He received an 8-year sentence with 6 years suspended, considering his time served and lack of prior convictions. The Keelley family chose not to give a statement, leaving them and the public outraged by the outcome. The Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, immediately filed an appeal, as they also believed the sentencing was too lenient. On April 19, 2007, the prosecution appeared before the Court of Appeal to request an increase in Horrigan's sentence. The judges agreed with the DPP and determined that Horrigan's sentence did not match the severity of the crime. A sentence of 12 years for each charge to be served concurrently was imposed. The time Horrigan had already served would be deducted from this. This meant that Horrigan would not be released until 2010 at the latest, requiring him to serve an additional 3 years. The Keelley family were relieved with the sentencing, as Horrigan was placed on the sex offenders list. However, his criminal history continued. In 2007, he was charged with armed robbery while out on bail for Rachel's killing. He attacked an elderly couple, stole €1,500, and escaped in their son's car. Horrigan initially denied the charges, but was found guilty. However, his conviction was overturned due to issues with the search warrant, leading to a retrial where he pleaded guilty to robbery and theft, receiving a 4-year sentence. In March 2013, it was reported that Horrigan was involved in a violent incident while in Wickfield prison. He had beaten up Jared London of the notorious McCarthy-Dundon gang, and he had beaten him to a pulp. Horrigan had attacked London in retaliation for an attack by Dundon on a friend of his. Sources from the prison told newspapers that Horrigan was a head case, and that he was moved out of the prison for his own safety. Ironically, only a few months later, Horrigan would be released from prison after serving his time for the robbery. When he left prison, he moved in with his girlfriend Teresa O'Neill, who lived just around the corner from Dundon's home place in Limerick. Teresa's brother, a convicted rapist, Thomas O'Neill, was involved in the Great Low Woods gang rape in County Clare in 2004. At the time, Thomas O'Neill was also the boyfriend of Dundon's ex-girlfriend. From here on in, there is a lot of overlapping with dates and convictions, but I think I've got it right. So bear with me. On the 13th of September 2013, Horrigan was arrested again, this time in relation to a shooting in Limerick. A man stood outside his home the evening before and had been shot, suffering a number of pellet wounds to his chest from a shotgun. A trial took place in January 2015, and Horrigan completed not guilty to the possession of a shotgun with the intent to endanger. He was found not guilty. However, in November 2013, he robbed a shop in Limerick. He had entered the shop, and the man behind the counter tackled Horrigan. But he got away, leaving the scarf he was wearing behind. Of course, when police got the scarf forensically tested, it led back to Horrigan. He was found guilty in 2015 and sentenced to 5 years in prison, with 1 year suspended. By 2016, it was expected that Horrigan would be released once more from prison. His girlfriend posted on Facebook that he would be home for Christmas. But by March 2017, his home in Metcroom in Limerick was raided by police, and €3,000 worth of heroin was discovered. 6 months later, a shop in Mallow, County Cork, was robbed at knife point, with nearly €1,400 taken. Within 4 weeks of that robbery, the media reported that Horrigan had gone on the run. He fled to the UK, and police launched a manhunt because he was on the sex offenders list. He was in breach of his conditions, and police had to know where he lived at all times. In June of 2018, Horrigan appeared in court again and admitted to the drugs found in his home. He was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months, with the 6 months suspended. In December 2018, he was in the courts in relation to the off-license robbery, and again he pleaded guilty. He received a 6-year sentence, with 2 of those suspended. He was due for release in 2022. On the 26th of March 2022, Horrigan attacked a woman in her 60s and a man in his 20s with a hammer, leaving the man in critical condition. He was charged with 4 offenses against the state and remanded in prison. He appeared in court in December 2022 and is set to face trial again, but no date has been set. In September 2022, Horrigan was in court again for breaching conditions put on him as a sex offender. He did not notify the guardian again of a change of address, and he joined Tinder. He was sentenced to 12 months in prison. Rachel's parents have stated that they don't care how long Horrigan spends in prison, as it won't bring back their Rachel. This was not aimed towards Horrigan's other victims, but Horrigan himself. If the justice system didn't always work within these outdated laws, and if the judges had power of discretion, a lot of people would be saved from criminals like this. Horrigan is only 38 years old, and has a long life ahead to cause mayhem in this country. Where will it end, and how many more victims will there be? Brianna Wells was born March 25, 1997, and adopted by Dave and Rochelle at the age of 7. After her parents later divorced, Brianna mostly lived with her father and attended Marcos Denisa High School in Tempe, Arizona, where she ran track. She was also a member of the Tempe Monthly Meeting, which is a Quaker community fellowship. She enjoyed hanging out at local parks, but mostly the Kiwanis Park. She really loved animals, especially horses and her dogs, and dreamed of becoming a canine police officer. She even volunteered at an animal shelter and helped feed the homeless. She was described as very funny and sweet with a warm heart. However, she was also described as having violent outbursts towards her parents. At 9:30 a.m. on December 29, 2014, the 17-year-old's body was discovered by someone taking out their trash in an alley near Mobile Lane in 18th Place in South Phoenix. Police say Brianna had been beaten and shot multiple times, and they believe her body was dumped in the crime-ridden neighborhood. Her father said Brianna was home the night before when he went to bed. Although Brianna did have a troubled childhood and had run away many times, she always returned. According to an online post by her father, she had been at Willow Springs Mental Health Facility in Reno, Nevada, because she wasn't stable enough at home. She had been in and out of several institutional settings due to her suicidal ideations. She was also refusing to take her meds or go to therapy. He said that on December 26th, she left home and did not return for 2 whole days. When she did return, she described being at a place possibly South Phoenix where there had been gunfire. He said when he woke the next morning, he learned that she had left again in the middle of the night and left him a note. He said the contents of the note were pleasant in some ways, but very disturbing in others. He became concerned, but she did not have a working cell phone, and so he had no way to reach her. Soon after, he found out the horrible news. Police interviewed neighbors, searched for clues, and followed up on countless leads, but the killer has never been found. As of today, Brianna's murder still remains a mystery, and this case remains unsolved. Haruchika Miyagi was born June 13, 1981, was Japanese descent and went by the name Chika and Haru. He graduated from Lehigh High School in Utah and then from Utah Valley University. He wanted to make something of himself and started trying to build a business through social media and by producing videos on YouTube. On his channel, he would discuss a multitude of things, but primarily he would make videos regarding the trading software called Magic Stick that he created. He even created his own company called Tentai Financial Group, which he described as a Forex educational firm. He was the only employee the company had, and strangely the address for the company doesn't even exist. At the age of 34, he lived in American Forks, Utah, and in 2015, things took a strange turn. On December 2nd and 3rd of 2015, he posted multiple posts with very strange and vague statements with little to no comments. Just before 9 p.m. on December 3rd, 2015, Haru would post the following words to his public Facebook account. The power of giving is important. Want to give as much as possible. It's called karma. For the next 2 days, his usually busy activity online went silent. Then on December 5th, he showed up 565 miles south of his home in the small town of Dewey, Arizona, at a very remote, large horse ranch known as Med Bar Ranch. At 5 p.m., he opened the main gate to the property and proceeded up the dirt driveway to the house. A woman stepped outside to see who had pulled up to her home down a long private driveway in a red 2002 Mazda Protege. He got out of the car and asked her if he could stay on her property or at her home for the evening. And she quickly told him no and suggested that he should try hotels in Prescott a half-hour away. The woman then states that he calmly walked to his vehicle and got back inside. Instead of turning his car around and heading back the same way he came in, he proceeded north on the property and crashed through the closed gate before disappearing from her view. The woman then contacted the sheriff's office to report a trespasser, and when they arrived to take her statement, they investigated the area. The woman pointed out the broken gate and the direction in which the man was headed. Around 2 hours later at 7 p.m., about 1 mile around the bend from the ranch, they found Haru's car. The Mazda was in Yarborough, Washington. The hood was wedged between the stony wash and barbed wire fencing. The vehicle was stuck and heavily damaged in the front and was towed away. For days later, search dogs covered the area where the Mazda was found, but they picked up no scent or trace of Haru. Haru's cell phone was last traced somewhere shortly after he drove away from the ranch, and he has never been seen again. There are 2 different routes he could have taken to reach the area in which he was last seen. Each route involves navigating winding dirt roads and making a series of turns that one would consider unlikely without a final destination in mind. Why Haru was in Arizona on this day is unknown. He hadn't shared any plans to travel and had no known ties to anyone in any part of Arizona. What led him down the series of dirt roads he would travel that day in the area in which he was last seen is a complete mystery. His Twitter is full of tweets urging people to call him to learn how they can trade with the pros using his Forex magic stick. His LinkedIn shows no experience at all, but 14 years as a CEO global Forex trader. His family reported him missing when he didn't show up for work. And as of today, this case remains unsolved. Case of the Hawks couple. Thomas and Jackie Hawks set out on a journey that would lead them straight into the grasp of tragedy. Unaware, they made the decision to sell their prized possession, their luxurious yacht, which would plunge them into a dark abyss. Imagine the sun glistening on the calm waters, a final voyage on their treasured vessel, and a potential buyer about to finalize the deal. As the sails billowed in the wind and the waves murmured their secrets, the Hawks ventured into the unknown, oblivious that this very journey would become their eternal shroud. Thomas Hawks and his brother Jim Hawks grew up on a farm in the heart of California. They shared a passion for surfing the rolling waves and navigating the vast open sea. However, life's twists and turns saw Thomas answering the call of duty, trading the embrace of the ocean and joining the military. He even ventured into the harsh battlegrounds of the Vietnam War, leaving his mark as a veteran. Despite this, his resilience never wavered, and he transitioned into the realm of justice, becoming a dedicated probation officer. Meanwhile, Jim's path led him into the uniform of a police officer, eventually rising to the esteemed position of police chief. Service and duty ran deep in their veins. Thomas was a dedicated bodybuilder. He had sculpted his body, a testament to his unwavering commitment to physical strength. His impressive physique was a symbol of his indomitable will. Life took its course, and Thomas married, bringing 2 sons, Ryan and Matthew, into the world. However, like the changing tides, the journey of their relationship faced unexpected turns, and they ultimately ended up divorcing. Thomas found himself in Prescott, Arizona, starting a new chapter in his life. His sons followed, drawn to their father in this new land. Then, in an unexpected but positive twist of fate, Thomas crossed paths with Jackie. They fell in love, and their hearts entwined, sparking a love that burned brighter than the Arizona sun. However, Jackie carried scars not of the heart, but of life's cruelty, as a past accident had left her unable to bear children of her own. Yet, her love knew no bounds, as she embraced Thomas's sons as her own flesh and blood. This couple had always faced life's demands with unwavering determination. They toiled ceaselessly, their dreams woven into their hearts. Their aspiration to own a vessel, a testament to their hard-earned rewards, became a reality as they bought themselves a 55-foot yacht. They named it Well-Deserved and named their loved ones deemed as a fitting and well-deserved reward for their unyielding work ethic. They took the vessel to the next level by equipping it with the most advanced technology. With retirement's golden years ahead, Thomas and Jackie set sail along the picturesque West Coast. Mexico's exotic shores, California's rugged coastline, and Catalina Island's enchanting beauty became their playground for the following 2 years. They were without a doubt living the dream they had so ardently envisioned. Life being an ever-evolving story, new chapters beckoned. One of Thomas's sons began a family of his own with the promise of a grandchild on the horizon. Anticipation filled their hearts, the prospect of becoming grandparents, a beacon of joy. Thomas and Jackie then considered the idea of returning to Arizona to be close to their expanding family. And so they made the difficult decision to part with their beloved boat. They decided to sell it in Newport Beach, California, little knowing that this decision would thrust them into the maze of leading to a tragedy they could never have anticipated. The dreams they had so faithfully pursued would take an unexpected and heart-rending turn. In November 2004, they listed their well-deserved yacht for sale at $435,000 through an advertisement in a magazine, choosing to bypass the conventional broker route to save on hefty commissions. With the high price tag for their beloved yacht, which was valued near $500,000, they were confident that the vessel's well-maintained condition would attract eager buyers. But fate had other plans. The first person who responded to their advertisement was not who they had expected. The mysterious individual who reached out was named Skylar Dillion, and what happened next exceeded their expectations. Initially, they were doubtful when they met Dillion. Thomas, a former probation officer, couldn't help but wonder how someone so young had acquired so much wealth. Skylar's explanation, which included a previous career as a child actor, being part of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers cast, and appearing in commercials, had made him rich. Skylar Dillion made a great offer, a full cash offer, sweetened with an additional $15,000 for some personal items he wants to keep on the boat. To further reduce the Hawks' hesitation, he arrived at the meeting with his pregnant wife Jennifer Hendrickson and their young child. Their seemingly happy family had an effect, slowly melting away the Hawks' worries as trust gradually grew. However, under their friendly exterior, Skylar and Jennifer were hiding a treacherous deceit that would lead to serious consequences. The Hawks were unaware of this as they had developed a strong trust in Dillion. The sea trial, a normal part of boat sales, was set for November 15, 2004 and turned out to be a significant day. Shortly before the trial, on November 12, 2004, the Hawks went on a meaningful trip to Santa Catalina Island near the Los Angeles coast. It was a bittersweet occasion celebrating the upcoming sale of their beloved boat and one final sail on it. Friends and family were told that a buyer had been found, and the sale was close. On November 15th, as the morning sun illuminated the scene, Skylar and his wife arrived with two men, one slender and the other muscular. The Hawks were surprised by the presence of these two individuals, sparking suspicions. However, Dillion quickly eased their concerns by stating that they were merely acquaintances. He clarified that the well-built man was his accountant. After these explanations, Jennifer and the child stayed behind, while the others boarded the boat and set off on their journey. They slowly navigated into the vast open waters, leaving their familiar world behind. Little did they know this voyage would be their last, mysteriously marking the final time anyone would see them. As the sun set and darkness descended, Carter Ford, the port captain of the Lido Isle Yacht Club and a close friend of the Hawks, looked forward to their evening meeting with anticipation. Plans were in place and excitement filled the air. However, when night fell over Newport Harbor like a heavy blanket, an unsettling message disrupted the peace. Jackie called with troubling news that made Ford shiver. The Hawks were on a sea trial which seemed routine, but something felt off. The buyer and his group had kept them out on the water longer than expected, leading to uncertainty. The Hawks promised to contact once they returned, and this was the last anyone heard from them. When the sun rose again, the yacht had returned to Newport Beach, but the couple was nowhere to be found. A puzzling mystery unfolded, as they seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Days passed with no word to their loved ones, their phones silent. To add to the mystery, Jackie's SUV was also missing, leading some to wonder if they had gone on a sudden road trip to enjoy their recent financial success, choosing to disconnect from the world as they celebrated. But the dark reality became clear: the Hawks were not on vacation. Something more sinister had happened to them, and it was only later that they realized this. A week passed, and the unusual silence from the Hawks sparked many questions and concerns. Their loved ones felt the weight of their absence, with a fear that something was wrong. The family turned to Carter Ford in desperation, asking him to go out to the well and investigate. As Ford boarded the boat, he felt a deep sense of concern. Everything seemed to be in disarray, with a lone white towel hanging ominously from one of the portholes. The family was disturbed by the strange scene and immediately took action by filing a missing persons report. Detectives were called to the scene. They proceeded cautiously, breaking the lock on the cabin door and entering. Inside the boat, there were no signs of violence, but a sinister presence seemed to be lurking in the shadows. Their attention was drawn to a white towel stained with fresh ink hidden between the bed and the wall. It made them stop and think, prompting disturbing questions. A receipt nearby revealed a troubling list of items: bleach, cleaning supplies, heavy-duty trash bags, and Tums and antacid. The detectives began to connect the pieces of this dark puzzle. The cleaning supplies seemed well suited for a murder, with the trash bags to dispose of evidence, bleach to clean away any traces, and Tums possibly used to calm a stomach, unsettled by the horrific acts. The boat had secrets that scared everyone who entered. Investigators were determined to find out the truth about the yacht's buyers, Skylar and Jennifer. A surveillance team was quickly put together to follow them closely. Undercover officers followed the Dillians, observing them living their daily lives seemingly unaffected by suspicion. They were regular volunteers at a local church, and Jennifer's work as a hairdresser presented no unusual facets. To the world, they appeared utterly ordinary, masking their true nature with chilling adeptness. As detectives delved deeper into their backgrounds, a grim portrait emerged. Skylar Dillian's history bore the stain of a prior conviction for burglary, landing him on probation. Financial scrutiny revealed that the couple was drowning in a staggering $87,000 worth of debt, a dire financial abyss. The investigators were puzzled by a question. How did the couple manage to buy a yacht when they were struggling financially? After looking into Skylar's claims of fame on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, they found out he was just an uncredited extra in a few episodes. To add to the mystery, the couple was living in Jennifer's parents' garage. Their desire to own a yacht didn't match their financial situation, leaving the detectives confused. The more they investigated, the more confusing the situation became. Castellian was being questioned intensely, but he stuck to his story that he had bought the yacht legally. Surprisingly, he admitted that the money came from selling drugs. Things got even more intense when he revealed that he had handed over a briefcase full of cleaned money from Mexico, mostly in $100 bills, to Tom. Interestingly, Skylar said that the Hawks had asked him to help with setting up a bank account in Mexico, so they could start a new life there. He also mentioned that Tom and Jackie had given him power of attorney, allowing him to control their money and transfer it to Mexico. To strengthen his story, Skylar showed what seemed to be a real power of attorney document with signatures that looked real. Despite denying any role in their disappearance and suggesting the couple may have gone to Mexico, doubts remained. Cell phone records showed the Hawks' phones were near the Mexican border the day after the sea trial with Skylar. Frustrated detectives went back to square one and refocused on the Hawks family, prioritizing the safety of the couple above all else. They sought answers by going to the national news, where a family member appeared on camera asking for help in finding the missing couple and their car. The mystery only grew deeper, capturing the world's attention with its twists and turns. An American citizen in Mexico called in, sparking action in the investigation. He had seen the car they were looking for on the news, and it was right in front of him. Authorities went to a house near Ensenada in Mexico and found the Hawks' car. Despite the Hawks being missing for over a month, and the fear of something bad happening, there was hope that this could be them. There was a glimmer of optimism. Maybe this was the breakthrough they needed. A Mexican federal agent knocked on the door, leading the way. The names Skylar Dillian and Jennifer came up in the Spanish conversation. The man at the door had a chilling connection. He was an old surfing buddy of Skylar. He casually mentioned that Skylar had given him the car, and then Jennifer, his pregnant wife, had driven him back to the U.S. The detectives quickly collected samples from inside the car and found Skylar's DNA on a heater knob, a signal and struggling to solve the mystery. Armed with the unsettling revelation, the investigators received a tip that Skylar was going to flee. He had asked his probation officer for permission to leave the country, which helped the quick-thinking detectives quickly catch him for money laundering, the crime he had confessed to earlier. Investigators arrived at the garage apartment where Jennifer's parents resided and found a collection of personal items belonging to Tom and Jackie, such as their camera and driver's licenses. Upon inspecting Jackie's driver's license photo, They were surprised to see a striking resemblance to the notary's description, raising further suspicions about her involvement and the legitimacy of her actions. The investigation took a darker turn, shedding light on the unsettling idea but more people may be involved in this mysterious disappearance than previously thought. As the lies began to unravel, it exposed an intricate web of mysteries and secrets waiting to be revealed. In the garage, investigators found a business card belonging to an LAPD detective who worked with Interpol. They contacted the Interpol agent to discuss their investigation into Skylar's possible involvement in the Hawks' disappearance. The Interpol agent then shared that he had encountered Skylar a year earlier during a murder investigation in Mexico involving an American citizen. This connection raised the possibility that Skylar might have been involved in both cases. The main challenge was to find evidence. Detectives found something strange on the yacht. In photos, it had 2 anchors, but in reality, only one. Their suspicions grew as they realized the discrepancy. A chilling theory started to form. Detectives linked anchor absence on yacht to couple's disappearance due to Skylar's ruse concealing sinister plot to steal prized possession. Needed undeniable proof. The net was tightening. Jennifer's actions revealed her involvement in the plot. Her effort to drain Hawks's account was evidence of her awareness of the situation despite not being on the boat. But at a crucial moment, detectives identified a name in the power of attorney papers, a name that would shift the course in solving this puzzling case. The name belonged to a man who had witnessed the significant transaction, a man named Alonso. Alonso, who was only 19 at the time, resided with his parents and worked as a prison guard. A bond had developed between him and Dillian, while the latter was imprisoned for theft. Skylar had convinced Alonso to accompany him to the meetings. He was the slim man who had gone with him on the sea trial. Offering leniency in his punishment, they made an agreement with Alonso, pushing him to share his perspective and expose the chilling truth about the Hawks' destiny. As the tape recorder started playing, Alonso began to tell a frightening story. He revealed details about a man named John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who was introduced as an accountant by Skylar. However, Kennedy was not an ordinary man. He was actually a notorious gang member and former convict known as John F. Kennedy. Alonso explained how they had planned a dangerous scheme that would bring disaster to the Hawks. Their evil plan involved kidnapping a couple and taking them out to sea to throw them overboard. The frightening story began when John F. Kennedy pretended to be seasick and went below deck. Thomas, concerned for him, went down to check on him and fell into their trap. Skylar followed, and together they attacked Thomas. Amidst the chaos, Jackie asked worried questions. Alonso grabbed her, used a taser to immobilize her, handcuffed her, and took her to another part of the boat. Both Thomas and Jackie found themselves helpless, with their eyes and mouths taped shut. In those harrowing moments, as Jackie struggled to scream through her gag with tears of desperation flowing, Thomas offered a small gesture of solace. Handcuffed together, he tenderly stroked her hand with his fingers, a silent attempt to comfort her in the face of the grim fate that awaited them in the merciless hands of their captors. The grim saga continued as they were taken into the kitchen area, where the power of attorney awaited their reluctant signatures. The chilling ultimatum hung in the air like a death knell. Cooperate, and perhaps they would be spared, or resist and death would be their fate. The boat steered into the haunting depths of the ocean near Catalina Island, a place once filled with cherished memories for Tom and Jackie. On the deck of the vessel, they were bound together with a rope, a ghastly prelude to the impending horror. Dillian then disengaged one of the anchors from the boat's bow as he dragged the chain along, the dreadful sound echoing in their ears. They had heard that sound countless times before, but this time it signaled their inexorable doom. Jackie's pleas for her life were heartbreaking, as she yearned to see her grandchild and believed she was too young to die. Tom assured her they would be together as they faced the cruel reality, being cast overboard into the Pacific Ocean. They were pushed from their vessel, dragged down by the anchor, disappearing into the depths. Unfortunately, their bodies were never found, shrouding their fate in mystery. After completing their evil deed, Skylar began a cruel mission to eliminate any evidence of the Hawks' presence. He collected their precious belongings, including photographs, and heartlessly threw them into the deep ocean, where their memories faded away, abandoned without any regret. With all traces of the couple gone, Dillian and John F. Kennedy tried to return to a sense of normalcy as they sailed back to Newport Harbor, relaxing and fishing as if the terrifying recent events were just a disturbing illusion. Justice caught up with Skylar, Dillian, John F. Kennedy, and Alonzo Machane as they faced 2 counts of first-degree murder. Jennifer Hendrickson defended her husband's innocence while facing her own reckoning as she too was charged with 2 counts of murder. Her involvement in the gruesome act was revealed, laying bare her complicity. The chilling murders were driven by a strong desire for money. Myron Gardner, an ex-convict and former gang member, played a key role in connecting Dillian with John F. Kennedy, despite not actively participating in the crime. Gardner faced charges of involuntary manslaughter for his part in these events. Justice was served when different juries found them all guilty. Jennifer Hendrickson was sentenced to 2 life terms in October 2007 without the chance of parole. John Fitzgerald Kennedy received a death sentence on May 1, 2009 and was placed on death row in San Quentin State Prison. Alonzo Machane testified against the others, pleaded guilty, and received a lighter sentence on June 15, 2009, 20 years and 4 months in prison with the chance of parole. In September 2021, in March 2009, Myron Gardner's life changed after spending 4 years in prison. He decided to plead guilty to being an accessory after the crime, which led to the dismissal of the murder charges against him. Meanwhile, Skylar Dillian, also in jail, faced more accusations. He was said to have asked another inmate to carry out a dark plan against his own family members. Things took a darker turn when Dillian was also implicated in the murder of an American citizen named John Jarvie, who was killed in Mexico in 2003. Dillian's cousin and father, who were connected to the Jarvie murder, were considered crucial witnesses in both murder cases. On September 22nd, jury selection began for the trial of Skylar Dillian. Dillian was tried for the murders of Thomas and Jackie Hawks, as well as John Jarvie. The verdict was given on April 10, 2009, with Dillian receiving a death sentence from Judge Frank Faisal in Orange County Superior Court. He was sent to death row at San Quentin State Prison. Before Skylar Dillian was sent to prison, a troubling discovery was made. While incarcerated on March 13, 2008, he performed a disturbing act by partially cutting his own male private part with a razor blade as he wished to remove it. After receiving immediate medical attention, he was taken back to his cell the next day. In an interview, Dillian admitted that his reason for this extreme self-injury was a strong desire to transition to a woman. He had already changed his name from John Julius Jacobson to Skylar Dillian, choosing a gender-neutral name to represent his identity. Defense lawyers claimed that Dillian's need for money to pay for sex reassignment surgery was the hidden reason for the murders of the Hawks. However, it is important to understand that this motive does not justify the terrible crimes he committed. In 2019, Dillian's gender was legally changed to female, and she is now known as Skyla Preciosa Dillian. The Hawks family holds dear the lasting memory of Thomas and Jackie, always engraved in their hearts. These lively individuals, recognized for their adventurous nature, embodied goodness and genuineness. Their destiny took a harsh turn, and even though they have passed away, their spirits persist, shining a timeless light on our recollections. May they rest in eternal peace in paradise. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.